Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Technique Tuesday. My name is Ali Board and you are very welcome this morning. Now, you might be watching this live on YouTube. You might be watching it via catch up on YouTube. You might be watching it on my blog. There's a whole raft of places that you can watch this. Today, we are going to be tackling a mountain project and I will get to that in a couple of minutes. But first, I want to show you where you can get hold of all the resources so that you can follow along and you can paint knowing that you have everything ready. So let's pop over to my website, but let's show you the website address first. I'm sure you all know it by now, but just in case you don't, just in case you are new, and if you are new, a huge warm welcome to you. This is my website, www.learningtopaint.co.uk. And when you do go over to the website, this is the homepage that you will find, and there's a huge wealth of resources on here. It isn't all about the paid workshops or the paid all aboard membership. There's lots of things for you to find on here, and I just want to show you a couple of them if that's okay with you. So when you go to the website, you're thinking, well, where can I find all of the resources, Ali, for this Technique Tuesday broadcast? So pop over to my blog. And when you get to my blog, you'll see all sorts of things. There's a search bar at the top if you're looking for something particular. And you'll see there, if I scroll down just a little bit, you'll see there's lots of things that have gone on in the past for you to enjoy, all of which are free for you to access. So let's have a look. Today's blog post has already gone up, even though we're recording it as I speak. So it's the Technique Tuesday for October. And there you can see that the theme of the month, this month, because some of you may know that I have a very specific theme each month. It helps me to plan my lessons and it helps us to understand what we're all talking about this month. So the theme of the month this month is Scotland, a place that I haven't been back to for a very long time, but fingers crossed and all that, I'm hoping to get back to Scotland next year. So this is literally a bit of a teaser, a taster for me to remember all of the things that I love about such a magnificent country. Here is the photograph that I am using for inspiration today. I'll show you more about that in just a second, and you can download it from there as well. It is a royalty-free photograph so that you don't have to worry about any copyright issues when you paint from it. And here is all of the equipment that I am going to be using, plus a few extras as well, just in case there's something that you've spied in the corners of my demonstration and you're thinking, hang on a minute, Ali, what is that you're using? So I've tried to include everything there, and there are some links there too. Now, just to warn you, those are affiliate links. So if you click on any of those and buy from any of those websites, I do get a tiny, and it is a tiny amount of money, which helps towards keeping these Technique Tuesday broadcasts being able to be accessed for free. There's an Amazon link, there's links to the SAA, but there's also a new link there too, because as some of you may have noticed, I have opened my own shop on the website full of interesting art materials. So let's just click on one of those, shall we, just so that you can see what happens when you go over to it. You just stay on the website, but you go to the shop. And I would strongly recommend that you make yourself a cup of tea, pull up a chair and have a look through that shop, because there's all sorts of very unusual things. That's what we're trying to do with the new shop. It's called Tilsid's Online because that is the, what am I trying to say? That's the shop that my parents and I used to have. It is a family business that we've had for a long time. The business was started not by my family, but by somebody else's in 1880. So it is a well-established art materials and stationery business. So I hope you enjoy that new part of my website. So like I say, we're going to be thinking about Scotland for the next month. We've got all sorts of things going on. Next week I've got a Highland Stag workshop. The All Aboard artists are tackling all sorts of things, thistles and cottages. We're having a look at Glen, all of that kind of stuff. So there's lots of exciting things ahead. But today I'm going to be working from this, a piece of reference material. And I chose this because obviously it's quite clearly Scotland. Oh, and I see from the live chat that we have the lovely Sue in the room, who herself is in Perth today. And she's enjoying the fact that we've got a Scottish theme. I'm so glad, Sue. That's awesome. I chose this because it's quite loose. It's quite, I don't really need to worry too much about the detail on my mountains. I also chose it because it has bags of atmosphere, and that is something that I try to get across in my paintings all the time. Now, this is only going to be a starting point for me. I'm not going to follow this photograph religiously. I'm going to actually see where the kind of the demo takes me, where we end up with these various experiments that we're going to do today, because we're going to mix two unusual materials. We're going to be using some acrylic paint, but we're going to be using acrylic paint as a resist. So I've got a little bit of prep to do, quite a lot of drying to do. So save your chat up for, if you are watching live, for when I do the drying. Of course, if you're watching this on catch up, just forward wind through the drying. So you're just going to need to be patient with me with that. And then hopefully when that is dry, we'll be able to wash some watercolor over the top of it. And it's actually going to repel the watercolor. But we've got quite a specific technique to get us to that part. So shall we go to the overhead camera, and you can see what paper I'm using and how I'm going to start with this. So I'm using my own watercolour pad, the one that I work, when I work with the SAA. This is one of the products that we have put together. But I wanted to talk you through this paper and my decisions as to why I'm using it today. I'm using it because it's I'm actually going to take the sheet out of the pad. It's 100% cotton, which is a paper that I favour. I like my colour to be able to float on the surface for a long time. It's 300 grams, so it's not the heaviest, but it's certainly not the lightest paper either. It's a knot surface, so NOT, that also means cold pressed, and it's just called knot because it's not smooth and it's not rough. It's the Goldilocks version of things. But one of the reasons is a teaching reason that I'm using this today is because it's known as a traditional white, this particular paper. And so I wanted to show you a very white piece of paper against the colour of the watercolour paper itself. Now, why am I doing that when I've got clearly white mountains to paint? I'm doing that so that when I put the white acrylic down on the piece of paper, you at home will be able to see it. So there is method in my madness just occasionally. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tear a sheet out. I could work in the pad, of course, that wouldn't be a problem, but I tend to prefer to take my sheets out unless I'm working on location, just because then I can manipulate my piece of paper a little easier. And also, because I'm going to need to dry it in speedy old time today, I'm going to need to be able to dry it from the back. So that was kind of the main reason really for having a piece of paper nice and free. Now I'm using magnetic push pins to hold it down to my board. I have a magnetic board that I use, and I have to use the push pins because although you won't see it, my board is on a slope and the camera is kind of pointing at it at an angle. And so if I don't have the push pins on, then the piece of paper just ends up sliding south. So I'm going to move my chair a little bit. And I've got my photograph here too. You will have it either printed out or you might have it in digital form, but I've got it here in photograph format. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a little bit of sketching. So let's retrieve this rather disgusting looking putty rubber, which still has plenty of life in it, no matter what you might think from looking at it. And I'm going to have my photograph in my hand, and let's start with a bit of sketching. Now, I don't really want to fill this piece of paper. What I want to do is to have my mountains kind of within the space so that we've got plenty of area around them. A, to make the painting grow if we want to, but B, to give it lots of atmosphere. If you leave plenty of space around your painting, particularly when you're working in watercolour, it will give it that kind of nice ethereal look. Now, if you are watching this live, I can see the chat whilst I'm doing this, so please don't be afraid to pop your questions into the chat. I might just save them up to answer them until we are drying it, if you don't mind. So let's start with this mountain. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some very kind of light marks on the piece of paper. This is a Faber-Castell 9000 pencil. It is my pencil of choice. I tend to work with a B, an HB, a 2B. To be honest, it's usually the first one I pick up. But I don't tend to work with anything harder than that or softer than that. Just that's a personal choice, really. So we'll get some of this mountain in. We'll make sure that it's got a nice sweep at the bottom of it, and then it kind of disappears into the cloud. And we can use the pencil to ascertain which way the marks are coming down. It's got a bit of a ridge at the front. I have a feeling that all of this is going to disappear when I get the acrylic paint on it anyway, but we'll make a start on it and we'll see what happens. Now we'll get the sort of the back edge of this in, and you'll notice that my pencil hovers backwards and forwards. It's like a sort of a rehearsal. I kind of go, shall I make a mark? Shall I make yes, we'll make the mark down here. So you'll see that I draw with sort of lots of dots and dashes and all sorts of other marks going on. I hover, I don't tend to have my hand clamped to that piece of paper. I try to give myself lots of scope for where these marks are going to go down and how they're going to manifest themselves on the paper. So we've got that mountain coming down that side. We've got a bit of it kind of up in the cloud. Let's put some a bit of a nod to some of those clouds. I'm just going to bring it further down just a tad. And then over here, we've got a much darker ridge of hills, which I'm a bit undecided. I was having a bit of a glance at it as I was waiting to go live this morning, thinking, am I going to put those hills in? Mountains even? Not sure. But we'll draw them. We'll get some sort of mark going on with them. And again, we'll get kind of a nod to that bank of cloud that's coming in. We'll see what's going on. And then down, so I don't think I've made this steep enough. So let's bring that down a bit more. Got that lovely sweep going on here. And then we'll bring some of the kind of more moorland, kind of heather, sweeping up that way. So let's kind of come in there, go up a little bit for that ridge, and we'll bring some more of it. So we get that kind of idea that there's a valley going on. That's what we're after. What else should we pop in? Let's put a little bit more in the foreground. And then I think for the purposes of today's demonstration anyway, I think I'm good with that. I don't think we'll bother to do much more. It gives me an idea of where I need to head with various things, and more of a map than a blank piece of paper. So let's pop that to one side and let's get to the good bit. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to pop some acrylic paint down over the mountains where we want it to look like snow. So we're trying to pop the acrylic down for a white. We're also going to pop the acrylic down so that it repels the watercolour, so that when we put a wash of colour over the top, hopefully the colour will sink into some of the kind of peaks and troughs, nooks and crannies that we've made in the acrylic paint. And to do that, what I'm going to do is use a palette knife, which might seem a bit peculiar. Why aren't you using a brush, Ali? I'm not using a brush because I don't want there to be brush marks in it. I don't want it to look like I've used a brush to apply it. I want something more subtle than that. So I'm going to use a palette knife. And this is my favourite shape of palette knife. I call it a spade palette knife. It's actually a painting knife rather than a palette knife. Palette knife tends to be dead flat from the handle to the blade. Painting knife has what's called a cranked handle so that you can get your hand away from the surface. And I've used ones with a point on them. I use what are called pear-shaped ones, all sorts of things. But this is my favourite. This is a spade version. And I'm going to coat... oh, excuse me. I'm going to coat the back of it with acrylic. And then I'm going to smooth that acrylic on with a very light touch. So the back of the palette knife is going to be touching the paper, and I'm going to just skim it. If you push too hard, you won't get the same sort of effect. But I've got to load that palette knife up first. So to do that, you could do this in a palette if you wanted to. You could do it on an old scrap of card. I'm choosing to do it on a piece of framer's tape, simply because then I can screw that up and throw it away. And I'm going to pop that framer's tape just down on this side. This is the acrylic paint that I'm using today, but to be honest, it was the first one I put my hand on. And also because this isn't a quality of acrylic paint that I would particularly enjoy using in my paintings, because it's a student quality, so I find it a little hard to handle. I prefer the better quality versions, but that doesn't mean that it's not any good for things like this. All we really want to happen is for the watercolor to just be repelled. So it means that I can use any white. This is a mixing white, so it might not be as white as, say, a titanium white. But if you have more than one kind of in your stash, then experiment with it. I'm just doing this just to kind of mix it up in the tube, which is what these tubes are quite useful for. Just have an experiment on a piece of paper. Do a test first. And then I'm going to take the lid off away from my painting, because I've done that before. And then I'm going to squeeze a little bit of it out here onto my bit of framer's tape. I'm probably going to need more than that, but this is going to be enough to show you what I mean by loading the palette knife. So what we're after is we're after getting the back of the knife coated with paint. You can see that there. And we want it to have a kind of a variation. We don't want it to be all thin or all thick. Can you see that? In actual fact, I have a new camera. So I'm going to bring the new camera slightly into shot, and then we're going to go to it so that you can see my palette knife in lots and lots of detail. So can you see that there? It's kind of a little bit sticky. It's thin in places, but it's coating the back of that knife so that when I go, so you can see there, if I do it obliquely, there's not a lot on there at all. When I go to coat the piece of paper, I'm going to have a nice manageable amount of paint on my surface. So without further ado, let's go to my mountain and see where I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the palette knife down, skim it very lightly over the surface. I'm hoping you can see that. Yes, you can. I'll show you it in close up in just a second. And I'm going to leave it where it's missing on the piece of paper. I want there to be those gaps in it so that when it's dry and I apply watercolor over the top, we're going to get some interesting marks. Let's just load a bit more on the edge, on the tip of that knife, and we'll go again very lightly coming down our mountain. Now, if you push too hard on this, you won't get it to resist. It will just it will resist, but it will make a sort of a nasty mark on the piece of paper that you really, really don't want. So try to make the touch, the way that you're applying it, really light. And don't forget, if you've got any questions about this, if you want me to demonstrate this again, then pop them in the live chat if you can, so that I know that you're all still there as well. Let's bring this down a bit further. Let's coat that edge of it this time. And let's bring that down. Now, if I was working just on my own, for my own amusement, I would probably apply it a bit thicker than this, simply because the thicker you apply it, the more interest you get in the kind of the peaks and the troughs. But, of course, I'm demonstrating for you guys this morning, and we don't all want to be sitting here watching paint dry, as fun as that is. So let's do some more over here. Where is it? You can see I'm waggling my hand around, trying to make the decision about where stuff goes. So we'll put some down in there. We'll bring some of that across. Let's do a bit more. Maybe I did squeeze out enough. Who knows? Let's get a little bit further. I'm worried about putting too much on this one, because the top of this mountain's kind of cut off by the cloud. But, oh, let's do it anyway. Let's not overthink it. And so a bit more. I'm starting to run out of paint a touch, but I think I will have enough. Let's get a touch more in there. Maybe we'll drag this out over on the right hand side just a teeny tiny bit, so that we kind of give the illusion that our mountains continue. That's quite nice. And then over here on this side we need just, I've got something gritty. I think it actually, I don't think it's I think it might be in my paint. We've got just a little bit of a nod to some snow going on over here, but we don't want too much of it. So I'm using the back of my palette knife to kind of, like you were icing a cake, if any of you have ever iced a cake before, to push down and lift off so that we get some marks. In fact, I quite like those. Let's do some of those down here at the bottom as well. So just tapping the back of the palette knife on and lifting off just a tiny amount. Now, the problem with this technique is that it's really difficult to stop. So you have to make sure that you're making marks for all the right reasons and not just because it's too much fun to have a palette knife in your hand, she says. I still need to do a little bit of work to mine before you all shout faffing at me in the chat. Let's go over here. There's a bit of dark going on in there, but I think I've missed a bit in there. Do I need any over there? No, we don't. So I think we will call that quits. I'm going to clean my palette knife on my bit of microfiber so that it lives to fight another day. And then the good thing about this, of course, is that if I just peel this off very gently from my piece of paper, I can fold it all in on itself, and then I can throw that away so that I'm not chucking it down the sink, which is another thing. Now I need to dry this. I need to dry it from the front and I need to dry it from the back as well, just to make sure that it is super dry. So this is the time to, if you're watching this live, to get your comments in the chat, to get your questions in the chat, and just let me know where you're watching from and what the weather's doing, all of that stuff that we love on Technique Tuesday. So just bear with me a second while I start this process. So I'm using my heat gun, hopefully so that you can still hear me over the top of it. And let's we'll start off gently heating it, and then we'll work up a little bit. So just a bit of heat on the front. And then we'll move those, we'll remove, you see how my paper slips the minute that I take those push pins away? Then we'll flip it over and we'll do some drying from the back as well. I'm going to just up the drying. So Julie has provided an excellent question. Julie says, if you have plenty of time for drying, could you use gesso instead of the acrylic paint? Yes, Julie, you absolutely can, but you will get a very different effect because gesso will actually take on part of the colour. So acrylic paint tends to repel it. Depending on the better the quality of the acrylic paint, and the more thickly you apply it, the better the resist will be. No matter what thickness you use in the gesso, it will actually take on some of the colour. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is it will just have a different look. So I hope that answers that question for you, Julie. Catherine is saying, hello Ali, hello everyone from central Scotland, looking like rain. Lovely to see painting of mountains. Oh, I'm glad we have some of our lovely Scottish friends in the room today. That's awesome. It's just one of my most favourite countries, Scotland. I think it's beautiful. And it looks like Julie is saying that I have answered her question for her, so that's good. Sandy's over there in Norfolk saying that it's very damp. Let's give it another dry from the back. So Carol has said, why have you chosen acrylic rather than watercolor ground? Is it because you want it smoother? It's not because I want it smoother, Carol. It's because I want it to repel the watercolor, and watercolor ground won't do that. Watercolor ground, it will take on whatever color you put over the top of it, and I want this to stay white, so I'm using it as a resist instead of as a texture. That's kind of the point of it. So, the age-old test of whether your paint is dry. So let's just put that back down again. So like I was saying, the test for whether your acrylic is dry is a very, very simple one. You take this finger here, and it has a really important job to do. You do that with it. And if there's paint on your finger when you take it away, it's not dry. And so you need to give it a bit more. The other thing that it's good to do is to make sure that it has gone cold and it has gone hard, because you don't want to be painting back into a warm piece of paper. I'm also just going to do the paper dance a little bit because where the wet paint has touched some of the fibres of the paper, it's made them warp just a tad. Not a lot, just a tad. I'm going to make them warp even more in a minute when I chuck some colour at it. So I'm going to do the paper dance just to get it back flat again, and then we will stick it back down with our push pins, and then hopefully it's not going to go anywhere. Now, one of the things that I am very keen to show you is what this looks like in the close-up camera. So let's get that camera back in again. Ooh, too far, Ellie. So there you go. There's a much better idea of how my texture is forming, and you can see very clearly on the piece of paper the difference between the very white acrylic and the more traditional white of the watercolor paper. And hopefully that gives you a much better idea of the kind of the hit and miss kind of look that I'm after. So I hope that makes it a little bit clearer for you. So let's take that away, and now let's start throwing some paint at it, shall we? Let's have a look at this photograph and make a decision about what we're going to use. I think I was having a good look at this before the broadcast, and of course you could use all manner of colours, because I can see all sorts of things in there, if I'm honest. I can see a violet, I can see a blue, but for the purposes of today's demonstration, I'm going to keep it nice and simple. So I think there's 3 colours that I'm going to use. I'm going to use Bees Gold, which is one of my brand of watercolours. It's a very interesting yellow because it can be both dull and bright and of a brownish tint, and you can make interesting flower colours out of it as well. So I'm going to go for Bees Gold. Sticking with my range of watercolour paints, I'm also going to go for Black Iron Oxide. And I'm going for Black Iron Oxide because it granulates and then some, so I should get some interesting textures on my paper. And then I want a grey or something that I can make really quite dark without it granulating too much, so that I can get some nice crisp shadows out of it. And so for that, I'm going to go for Jane's Grey, which is a Daniel Smith colour. But you could choose all sorts of things. You could choose some violets or some cobalt blues or turquoises or anything. Really doesn't matter. What matters is the sort of the shape and the resist. So those are my colour choices. I'm going to start off with the sky, which I'm going to keep quite simple and quite loose. Make my way onto the mountains, and then the foreground down here at the bottom. To start getting my sky in, I have my Da Vinci Casaneo mop. This is a size 2. I've got a pot of water. It's just out of shot, but you'll probably hear me sloshing about in it. There we go. I have a spray bottle full of water, and I have a microfiber cloth as well, just to mop up anything that I don't particularly like the look of. I'm just going to move those push pins a bit because they're casting a shadow. So the first thing I am going to do is I'm going to give this a good old spritz across the top of my piece of paper. You can see the water starting there. Like I said, I'm not going to fill it. I'm not going to do what I call left to right painting. I'm not going to go edge to edge. I'm going to try to give my landscape a bit of atmosphere. Make sure my brush is nice and clean, because I'm a bit of a horror for things like that. Not cleaning my equipment when I have finished with it. And I'm going to go into my Jane's Grey. So let's start off. We've got this kind of lovely, rich, deep cloud formation over here on the left-hand side. Let's stick some of that colour in there. We'll come back to that in just a second. And let's pop some of it as well over the top of this mountain so that we get a nice stormy version. Now I'm going to go back in with a wet brush to move this, to kind of eke it out a little bit. I want to mop some of that up. I can use my microfiber cloth for that. Maybe add a touch more in there so that it goes kind of against that mountain. And I think possibly a bit more, let's be braver over on this side so that we get that kind of stormy, gloomy, foreboding kind of atmospheric thing going on. And then what we'll do over here is we'll use a touch of water to blend that out so that I get a soft edge. I don't like that bit particularly. And I've done a bit of negative painting there, so I've got my mountain already starting to show up. And then very lightly with the microfiber, would probably be better with kitchen roll actually, but I haven't got any with me today. I'm going to do just the lightest rag roll, very lightly tapping back into that colour to create some sort of cloud effects, to knock back some of the pattern that the brush has made. I want to make sure that I'm not getting any cauliflowers, so I'm hardly touching the paper at all. I'm glancing, you can't see me, but I'm glancing across it from this direction to make sure that it is evenly wet. I don't want any back runs, don't want any cauliflowers, any of that kind of nonsense going on. I think another bit of a roll in there just to create a bit more of a cloud kind of effect. Yeah, that works okay. Not wild about that shape, has to be said. Let's move that a bit. So that's better. And now that I'm happy with that, I am going to give that a blast with the heat gun as well to fix it. I probably should let the colour sink into it a little bit, but we haven't got time for that, so I'm going to give it a quick blast with the heat gun. Just bear with me. Going to dry it from the back as well. And for the time being, that'll do. It should be a bit drier, but you know, we're doing this live, so we can't be faffing about with it really. Okay, now I want to go to town on these mountains. I want to be able to get some real kind of darks in there so that the whites look bright. So for that, I'm going to reach for my black iron oxide now. I might have the two. Here's something I don't think I've done for a very long time, which is to have both a black and a grey in my hand. But I think the atmosphere of this painting warrants it, I think. So let's, I've got a number 6 imitation sable brush here, so I've got a bit more control over it. And let's start with the black iron oxide, and let's start as we mean to go on. Let's try very hard to not be afraid of our darks. And I'm going to start up here. Now you can see, look, straight away, the acrylic is repelling my colour. Can you see that? It's pushing it away. It's pushing it into those peaks. Isn't that just the most marvellous thing? So if I, like I said, if I'm brave with that, let's pull some of that colour over the top of this mountain as well. You can see how it starts to punch its way through. And where the paint is, it's quite hard to describe, but where the paint is over the top of the acrylic, it goes kind of like glass. And so that you can lift it off and you can move it around quite easily. So there you go, look, you can mop it up with your brush. But where it sits in those little troughs where I haven't put any acrylic down, it's hitting the paper and you're getting a lovely dark, rich shadow on it. Isn't that just delightful? And of course, it takes care of a lot of the problems for you. So if you were trying to recreate that look in watercolor without any kind of resist method, you'd be in a bit of trouble, wouldn't you? You'd be struggling to achieve it. So here I've made my mountain a very regular shape. Mountains aren't a regular shape at all. So I need to mess about with that a little bit to kind of upset what's going on. And let's start to bleed this down into, big blob of water there, into the surroundings so that we get that nice kind of sweep. Let's use my microfiber to kind of reclaim that. I'll work on this dark in a little while, I think, but I want to work out what's happening over here. Not a lot of white. So hopefully you're enjoying how this reacts with the acrylic. So for those of you who were asking about gesso or watercolour ground, I think that was Julie and Carol, can you see now why it's so important that it actually repels that colour for you to be able to get that kind of interesting texture? So let's do some over here as well. Let's go into the black iron oxide. I'm going to use the Jane's Grey in a second. I just want to get some sense. I am deviating from the photograph, but I said I would, didn't I? I said it was going to be our starting point, but it probably wasn't going to be where we ended up. And that's fine and dandy. You don't have to follow it religiously. You don't have to have it clamped in your hand and follow every mark that is made on it. It's just for inspiration. You can then decide where you go with it. So nice top of mountain in cloud, working well. Not going to poke it around any more than that because it doesn't need it. Let's go over here to the right hand side to get some extra kind of dark going on. Can you see as well how that black iron oxide is granulating? I don't need that to happen all over because I need other things to happen, but for the stage that I'm on at the moment, I need the texture. I can go back in and reclaim some of the darks later on, but for the time being I want that texture going in. Right, I'm going to switch brushes again to my Castaneo mop, but this is a size 0, so it's quite a small mop, but I want to get that sense of sweep coming in both from the darks and from what's going to happen in the foreground. I've actually just got to move my chair away a little bit. From the look of the chat, looks like you're enjoying this technique, which is good. And then let's go over here and let's be super brave with our darks to get that kind of the top of that mountainscape going in. I'm going to soften the top of this in a second, but we need it to have drama, don't we, by comparison? It can't all be fluffy. We need other things going on. So over here on the left hand side, let's use some water just to blend that out. And then down here, I want to tidy it up. Oh, I don't like the top of that. That's not working. Let's soften that so that it looks like it's kind of disappearing up into the cloud. That's better. And then let's come down this side. Let's leave a little slither of white so that it differentiates between this mountain and other things. And let's use a bit of dry brush, actually, serendipity for you, to get it looking more mountainous. I also think I need to carry it on a little way. It sort of stopped a bit abruptly and actually it kind of carries on up the valley a bit more. So let's get some of that in and again soften it until it meets this mountain. I don't need to describe everywhere that the mountain stops and other things start, but that will certainly do for the time being. Let's go to the Jane's Grey now, and we'll stick with this Casaneo mop, and we'll get some Jane's Grey, and we'll start to really think about these kind of sweeps that are coming forwards. Let's get that into shot for you so you can see what I'm doing. So we're going to drop some of this Jane's Grey in. I want this kind of foreground to look a little different. We want it to sort of sweep its way along the valley. Let's taper that into a point, and let's use our mop brush to pull this colour down into the surrounding scape. That's better, so that we get that kind of sense of distance. And I'm going to start to introduce my Bees Gold. Now this might seem weird, a colour to start to introduce, but you'll soon see what happens if I mix it on my brush. Did you see that? I double loaded it. I went in with the yellow, went in with a bit of the Jane's Grey, and what happens is you get a rather fabulous green. And the thing I love about this green is that it is a very natural, and when I say muddy, I don't mean it's a muddy colour. It's got that incredible kind of sludgy look to it, but it's still transparent because of the nature of the paints that I've chosen to create it with. We'll go for a bit more of the yellow up on this side, and then what we're getting is that kind of heathland, moorland, those wonderful colours of Scotland. And if you've never been to Scotland, put it on your bucket list, because it is the most incredible country, full of beautiful scenery and beautiful people, and I love it to bits. I cannot wait to go back next year. So we've got that sweep coming in over this side, and I'm not going to make too much of this. I don't want to overdo it because I'm really pleased. What's that little dot of stuff going on there? I'm really pleased with how this has come together. All I want to do is just increase some of the depth of colour to get that kind of lovely swoosh in. And we want it slightly warmer in the foreground so that we've got that sense of distance going on. And blending it out so that we're not kind of over describing it. Now that is a compliment. Sue has just said, love the effect of the acrylic and how dark it is in the Glen. I love that. It's really kind of you, Sue. Thank you very much indeed. Now going to go back in with my microfiber cloth again, just to touch and lift a little bit to create some extra texture going on. I need to, this is quite wet down here and I don't want it back running into the rest of it. Do the paper dance. I don't know what that blob is, but it looks like rock, so we'll leave that alone. And I'm going to give it another dry. Just bear with me a ticket. Again, not as dry as it probably could be, but for the purposes of today, that's fine. And Catherine is saying, thank you, Ali, for that green. It is so Scotland. Oh, I'm really glad. Thank you very much for that. So I've got a couple of things that I just want to do very quickly to this. I don't want to mess about with it too much because I'm very happy with it. I'm going to go back in with the Jane's Grey. There's some things that I want to deepen, darken, and add just a few touches of detail to make it pop just that little bit more. So what do we want to do? This side, there's just something about it that's not quite working, and I think it's the bottom of this. I think it needs to be a bit tidier. So let's take some of our Jane's Grey, push it back up into that dark and soften it so that it blends in. Then hopefully with those sweepy kind of marks added to it, yeah, that does look better. I don't think I want it to end there. I think I want it to end a bit further back. Yeah, that's better. Sort of tidied that up. And then let's go into this mountain, and let's see if we can push some of those darks a bit further. I don't want to get rid of all of the granulation that I've got out of the black iron oxide. What I want is to enhance some of it so that you get the best of both. There we go, that's better. Got a bit of light and dark going on. And then where it's touching the acrylic, where you pop your kitchen roll or your microfiber cloth back into it, you'll find it lifts really easily. And then perhaps up into here we can push. I left the photograph behind now. I'm painting the picture for what it needs. So again, I've got that nice kind of little trough in there. Let's see if we can just bring this down a bit further. Just want to fuzz this kind of down and around into the surroundings. Let's push that on a bit further. And then I think I've got to be a touch braver. I think actually I might go back to my black iron oxide for this. And maybe my number 2 Castaneo, to go back in and deepen just this. I was going to say a little bit, but that's quite a lot, isn't it? And pull some of this into the surroundings so that we've got that notion that there's another hill there. Ooh, that was quite brave, wasn't it? And I say ooh because I'm hyperventilating. Let's push that into that green so that we're not quite sure where one stops and the other starts. But now we've got another face to our mountain, haven't we? And that is much better. Do I want it to go all the way over there? Do I want it to go? Yes, I do want it to go all the way over there, apparently. Let's push that out. And let's make sure that this is blended into that green. And I'll have a look at it. And to be honest, I think I'm done. I think if I did any more to this, then I would push it too far. I'm loving that I've, I'm going to move it down a little bit. I'm loving that I kept the space around it, which, as you can see, provides the atmosphere. That is one of the major reasons that I paint in a vignette style, so that all of this space around it gives it that kind of lost look. Kind of, it focuses the attention. And I know that this is in the middle compositionally, it's not great. Maybe if I mounted it, I would do that with it so that that mountain is ever so slightly to the right hand side. But I'll give you a last couple of glimpses in that. Don't forget, I will photograph this and I will stick it onto the website, because then you can see what it is that I have done with it, and you'll be able to follow along with the tuition as well. That was too much fun. It was quite quick, wasn't it? We don't usually get done before the hour is up. It was quite a quick one, but sometimes your painting doesn't need hours and hours of work. There's that fabulous quote, isn't there? Is it Picasso? That I will paraphrase it, but basically it takes a lot of practice to reduce the time that you paint. So don't ever think that because you've done a painting quickly that it somehow isn't as valuable, doesn't have the same amount of value. Sometimes the skill is in leaving it alone, isn't it? And I know very often with watercolours, a lot of you email me or talk to me and you say, I just want to leave my paintings alone, Ali. How do I stop faffing about with it? I have to say, doing a live broadcast will do that for you, because you're very aware that you're taking up other people's time. Now, don't forget to pop over to the website to find the resources, to find that photograph, and I will put this recording, you might even be watching it now, up on that blog. And leave me a comment. Leave me a comment on YouTube. Leave me a comment on the blog. All of that stuff helps. It really helps to get my stuff seen. Don't ever think, oh, she doesn't want me to comment. I always try to reply if I possibly can. And it's lovely to hear if you have had a go at them as well. Now, if you do have a go at them and you fancy sharing it on social media, could you do me a little favour? That is to put at Ali Board Artist. So just put from Ali Board's Technique Tuesday, or from at Ali Board Artist Technique Tuesday, and tag me in it, for the plain and simple reason it helps me out, again, for people to see what I do and how I do it. And I'd like to see what it is that you do with it. And if you do enjoy social media, then please do give me a like or a follow, because that all helps too. Now, I am back. I'm looking at my notes. You can see me glancing down. I am back on the 7th of November. Now, November is a very different subject that I have never done before. So November's subject is called Animal Tales, and that's tales as in stories. So we are taking our inspiration from literature, from several sources, from the Brothers Grimm, from Edgar Allan Poe, from Aesop. And the classes that I've got going on that month are all going to tackle something. And the animal tale that we are going to be tackling for Technique Tuesday is The Golden Goose, which is a Brothers Grimm story. So I'm really looking forward to doing slightly more illustrative kind of work, but for getting a bit of bling out as well. So thank you ever so much for joining me today. Don't forget, always love to hear from you, always love to read your comments. I hope you enjoy Scotland as a theme of the month, and that you enjoy the mountain painting too. So take lots of care of yourselves, won't you? And I will see you very soon.